Vamos de imediato passar a palavra para o nosso último painelista, o João Goldman. Tenha bondade.
So, hello everybody, my name is Ian Goldman. I am the former head of evaluation in the South African government, and I'm currently with the Universities of Witwatersrand, the CLEAR Centre there, and the University of Cape Town. I'm going to talk mostly about African experience, but I also undertook a rapid evaluation myself in Venezuela and recently with the United Nations Evaluation Group. So I'll talk a little bit about those. I mean, firstly, there are different approaches to rapid evaluation. One is doing a full evaluation process, but more quickly, which we are referring to as rapid evaluation. Another is trying to draw from existing evaluations, so you don't need to do a new one. And we've seen examples of that in work on the voluntary national reviews on the SDGs in Nigeria and Madagascar, and on a smallholder evaluation in South Africa, and also on using evaluative workshops as a way of getting very rapid evaluative findings. And in this guide that I've got the link here to, there's a guide that's published with UNICEF, between CLEAR and UNICEF, on using these different models. And I originally started developing these models when I was in the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation. And then when I left, I've been carrying on this with African M&E Partnership, Twende Mbele, and with CLEAR, Anglophone Africa, and UNICEF. But today I'm going to focus primarily on the first of these, not on the others. And what did we do? We've developed guidelines for each of these approaches. We've been training African governments to undertake rapid evaluation through a 3-day training course where we actually develop the evaluation plan with the team that will actually undertake the evaluation. So it's a very hands-on experiential approach, and you can see the countries there that we've done this with. Also, there's a training that we've been running, the CLEAR Centre's been running with UNICEF to support African governments to embed evaluation in their voluntary national reviews. And in that training, we've done a 1-day module on rapid evaluation, a 1-day module on doing synthesis, and 1 day on evaluative workshops. And I've been involved personally in a rapid evaluation with UNICEF in Venezuela, and a form of evaluation with the United Nations Evaluation Group on UN agencies' work in national evaluation capacity development. And I've just got a picture at the bottom of the slide of the evaluation guideline that we developed, which has now been translated into French. And I think CLEAR Brazil has also translated this into Portuguese to use with Lusophone countries. But what do we mean by rapid? So in our case, while CLEAR LAC, for example, Mexico actually has, Conival has had a very interesting model of a type of very systematic, similar and fairly simple evaluations, which are done like with the American PART model. That's one way where they managed to do many evaluations using the simplified model. But we haven't taken that approach like in South Africa and Africa. We tended to use the model of more in-depth evaluations. So in this case, we were trying to do more in-depth evaluations, but in a shorter time. And by that shorter time, we mean 6 to 12 weeks to production of the report. But there's not just the issue about the time to actually do the evaluation itself. It's also how can we reduce the time on the preparation process and the process afterwards, where you do the management response or improvement plan and get the evaluation sort of embedded in the system. Another question we've had is how can we use rapid evaluations to not just have independent outsourced evaluations, but find a way to use monitoring and evaluation staff in government to do the evaluations, to reduce costs, but also to build a capacity in government to do evaluations. And we've been exploring, and you'll see this in the guideline, if the guideline's shared, the possibility of a facilitated evaluation. So you have an evaluation expert, but you don't outsource the evaluation to them. You use them as a facilitator of the evaluation, working with the internal team to build capacity. So when we think about the stages, from thinking of the idea to using the evaluations, there's a pre-evaluation stage where you might develop a concept note. you might develop terms of reference, you'd plan the design, you decide on the management and governance arrangements, you get the buy-in from stakeholders, and you might have to do supply chain processes to procure evaluator, either if they're a facilitator or if you're getting them to actually do the evaluation. Then there's the evaluation, doing the evaluation itself. And finally, as I mentioned, after the evaluation, the management response and improvement plan. And we need to think up how we can reduce all of the time on all of this while all of those stages are actually important. And so how can we do them more rapidly? When looking at rapid evaluations, it's also important to look at which situations actually favor a rapid one versus a longer and more robust one. And you need to be, you know, where the program or policy is very large and you need a very clear picture of benefits, or where the implications of the policy and the evaluation is critical, or where there's a lot at stake, or for example, there's a lot of contention about the program or policy. So it's very important that the result of the evaluation can't be challenged. Then it doesn't make sense to do a rapid one. It's better to do a longer, more robust one. Similarly, where you can anticipate and plan for decision points by scheduling the evaluation well in time. For example, you know a program is going to end in 3 years' time. You plan the evaluation to happen 2.5 years before, so you've got the result in time for your planning later. But where the situations which do favor rapid is where you need real-time feedback, you need to get the results quickly, say in 2 or 3 months, where the primary purpose is more formative to feed into ongoing policy and planning processes. You're trying to that formative approach in terms of organizational learning, also where your budget is limited, and where you're able to focus on narrower topics and or specific geographical areas. So when you undertake it, you need to do very good preparation. Just because you're doing the evaluation rapidly, you have to do the preparation very well so you can be very efficient. A key element is limiting the scope, limiting the evaluation questions and limiting the geographical scope. It's important also to think about pragmatic and shortened methods. On the next slide, I'll talk about that. Working in teams to maximize the work that can happen in parallel, and trying to make sure perhaps that you have more accessible outputs, short reports, short videos. Doing a long report always takes a long time, so perhaps focusing on short reports and short videos or evidence briefs. And in the actual methods for the evaluation itself, perhaps reducing a literature review to a few critical international papers, narrowing down the secondary data you're going to look at. Where possible, depending more on using existing data rather than collecting new data. Where you're collecting new data, reducing your data points. Trying to do more group work rather than individual interviews. Perhaps doing phone interviews rather than face-to-face. Perhaps doing short interviews, for example, online, but in all these cases, being careful about how you're going to deal with bias. So you need to, there's a tension here between the robustness and the speed of the evaluation. So you need to think of issues about representativity so that you can make inferences from the results, the external validity of your results, the rigor of your individual methods, but you're limited by the time available. Making sure you're triangulating so that even if you're doing shortened methods, you're using the triangulation to try and validate what you're doing. Making sure, being very careful about the stakeholders so that although you may do fewer interviews than you would in a full evaluation, you've got the key stakeholders. And within that key stakeholders, making sure that those key stakeholders also give you a 360-degree picture of the intervention in question. Another thing you can think about is using expert panels to try and speed up your feedback, and validation by people who know the situation well. All of these are tools you can use to try and speed up the process. Now, as I mentioned, this training has been run in various countries in Africa. And in South Africa, there's been one rapid evaluation that has been done as a result. This has been done internally. The Western Cape Cape Province, which is one of our 9 states in South Africa, has done 3 internal evaluations linked to the COVID response, and there's been a lot of policymaker interest. Benin has done 2 using a facilitated model. Sierra Leone has done 2 using an internal model. Ghana has done 2. And personally, I've also been involved in a couple myself, as I mentioned. So what are some of the key lessons? So Ghana reported that their key lessons were, they found that because it was timely, it was really helpful in providing insightful evidence to the respective ministers and their implementation teams. It deepened the interest and appetite of the respective ministries for evidence to inform their decisions. And it has also helped to demystify perceptions about the complexity of evaluations, because evaluations often generate a lot of fear in decision makers. And some other key lessons I draw overall is the importance of seeing the time for the evaluation, not as just doing the research process itself, but the preparation and the post-evaluation stage of the improvement plan, etc. You need to allocate the time to build ownership. So what I saw is in some of the rapid evaluations, people tried to skip the preparation stage and just try and speed up the actual doing of the evaluation. And that led to problems in terms of ownership. So you can't skip that preparation, the building ownership, etc. But you must limit the scope. And I saw, for example, in the Venezuela evaluation I did, although we were trying to do this rapidly, people were very reluctant to reduce the number of interviews we were going to do. And also in the Venezuela example, what I did was to use workshops to build picture and validate results, and using workshops to get a big picture very rapidly after an initial review of what the situation was on the ground. The evaluations need careful design, and we ran this 3-day course to help the teams actually design the evaluation. And fourthly, I think it is possible to do the evaluations internally. And I think this is very important, to move away from the obsession with independence to rather focusing on objectivity and credibility, and trying to see how we can actually build capacity to do evaluations using an evaluation expert as a facilitator. But what has come up in trying to do this is we need to give government staff more training in research skills. It needs the people to be able to allocate the time from their work to be able to do this. So you've got to get the authorization to do this. But it can be very powerful when people internally do this. For example, in Sierra Leone, people from the education ministry were actually going out to schools to do the evaluation, and they found the process very powerful. So, you know, it can be a very effective process. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.